are you ever like worried you run into somebody?
I did last year. Well, do you really want to know the true story? You want me to give you the true story?
Tell the whole story. Let's hear it.
If you want to know probably one of the craziest things that I've ever had happen to me while I was out filming.
Okay.
This is probably one of them.
All right. Well, here we are, Chris. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Chris
Anthony.
Robinson. The Chris Robinson, and people mostly know for those crazy white light videos that you get.
And his voice.
And his voice. We'll talk about his voice in a little bit. But the videos where the coyote literally, or bobcat literally comes within 10 or 20 yards of the truck. And I remember the first time I saw it, I thought, what is he? He's cheating. What is he doing? What is he doing to get him that close? And I think a lot of other guys think that too. They, you hear, they don't come to calls like that in my area. So tell us a little bit about how you got started with white light or with lights in general, just from the very beginning.
From the beginning, very, very beginning?
Very beginning.
Very beginning?
If I don't know you at all, how did you get started?
Man, I guess back when I was a little kid, I was probably 8 or 9 years old. My dad got to be good friends with a guy named Murray Burnham, which if a lot of the old timers, the guys that were really kind of the pioneers of the sport, there's kind of an argument between who really was the first guy that ever went out and said, I'm going to, run a distress sound and call up predators with it. Well, Murray and Winston Burnham, two brothers, they were one of those guys that was in that category. Well, somehow, I don't know how it happened, but my dad ended up meeting Murray and became good friends with him.
Okay.
And that was kind of my dad's introduction to predator hunting and by extension, night hunting. And the first time I ever remember, I was a little bitty kid. Me and my dad traipsed off down into a creek bottom right down the road from my house. Matter of fact, you'd probably been there with me before. And back then, he had a miner's hat, one of those big giant miner's hat with a battery, like a battery pack that was this big. No joke. He had a belt that he put on like he was going in some kind of cave or something. And we traipsed off down in there, and the call that we had was an old Radio Shack. It was like one of those cheap cassette players that had the little buttons on the end of it.
Okay.
It wasn't even a speaker, like
Wow.
like the old school tape cassettes where you had the speaker and the wire that you walked out there 15 feet. This was an actual tape cassette. So we'd put it in there, we'd hit play. And back then, my dad really didn't know what was going on. He didn't know what to do. What he learned was from Murray. Well, Murray was kind of more a traditional day hunter.
What year was this when you were?
This would have been either 88 or 1988 or 89.
Okay.
Somewhere in that ballpark, because that was right about the time that my dad kind of started getting into it. Well, the very first introduction that I ever had or experienced with a predator coming to a call was that night. We walked off down in there. We had our little cassette tape, and back then, my dad would he had a little dial on his light pack, and we would call. We'd sit there in the dark, and then he'd gradually turn this light up. He'd look around a little bit, and then he'd turn the light back off, which is obviously we found is probably the worst thing you could possibly do.
on his light pack. What do you mean light pack?
That battery pack, it was giant. It was like this big, but it had a dial on the top of it. It was a rheostat.
And the light ran up to his head.
And it had a cable coming up to the top of his head with the
miner's
kind of
setup.
like a coon light, an old school coon light, but bigger. And he'd turn that light on. We'd call a little bit, and then he'd turn it off, and we'd sit there in the dark, calls running. I was a little bitty kid. I was snuggled up next to him. I didn't know what was about to happen, Well, then I remember vividly he turned that light on one time, and about 5 feet from the end of his feet were two big old giant eyeballs.
5 feet.
Like 5 to 10 feet. They were as close as they could get.
You were a little kid. That's your.
And I'm a little kid, and I'm like, what do we do? I didn't know what was going on. Well, at the time, he had his rifle. He had a .223. How he was going to shoot something with it, with no light on it or nothing, it was we were experimenting. He was experimenting as much as anybody at this point. But he had the gun laying across his lap, and he tried to move to get on this. It was a big old cat, a big bobcat had slipped in on us, which obviously later on, further down the road, that's why we realized you got to leave the light on if you're going to do lights.
Right.
Well, that cat, as soon as he made a move whatsoever, that cat just, boom, he just took off and hauled ass.
So you didn't get him?
No, we didn't kill the cat. But that was the first introduction that I ever got to predator hunting as a kid, and that was kind of like that was the thing that lit the fire for me for predators and calling, but more so just the night hunting aspect of it is what caught me so much.
So how old were you at that point?
I was either 8 or 9 years old, somewhere in that ballpark.
So in my mind, I'm thinking, there's this, some point he has an epiphany and he thinks, later in his life, I got to use a light. But really what happened is it was from the very, very beginning.
From the very beginning. Lights were...
The first exposure you ever had to hunting at all, really.
Yeah, well, me and my dad had done some squirrel hunting and, hunting birds like pheasants and stuff like that and dove around the house. But that was the very first time that I had ever been night hunting.
Yeah.
And there was something about seeing those eyes that the only thing that I can relate that to is guys that go fishing a lot, like when they're a kid and they throw a cork out in the water, and the excitement you see when that cork goes under the water. It's the same excitement I see to this day. I'm 44, and every time I see a set of eyes, even to this day, I still get that same excitement that I got the first time that I ever saw, the first predator under a light like that,
So so that's the very first time you ever were exposed to lights, and you didn't get the cat. You're 5 feet away. It's kind of a cluster. It sounds like didn't know he was experimenting. Didn't know what you were doing. Give us kind of I know you can't tell the whole story, because it would take years, forever. But from there, from not getting the cat, not knowing what you're doing, all the way to, hey, I've been out with you before, and we call in coyotes, and it's like you're talking to them. It's like you're saying, hey, go stand right there.
Right.
So walk us through how the progression with your, tactics and with your gear, how do you get from point A to point B?
From point A to B, probably to condense it into a short version, when I was probably, 18, 19, 20 years old, me and a couple of buddies, we started hunting predator contests around the house.
So 10 years go by and you don't really change anything?
No, we kind of dabbled in it, and we obviously made plenty of mistakes, and unfortunately, by the time my dad got to the point where he was, his health was down and stuff like that, it was kind of like, that was the time frame when we were really kind of learning how this game works as far as the lights are concerned.
Yeah.
So we hunted a bunch of contests, and we got to the point where it was like, you know what, we're out here, we're calling these animals into 10, 15 yards, killing them with shotguns, and we're experiencing something that's so much fun that I thought to myself, man, if there was any kind of way that we could portray how much fun we're having on a TV screen, this is the best sport on the planet. There's no way that people wouldn't be able to watch that and want to go out and experience it themselves.
Yeah.
The problem was getting from point A to B. How do you take something that you're experiencing hunting, just out in general hunting contests, just out killing, and translate that onto a TV screen? That's a lot easier said than done.
Easy.
And there's a lot of guys out there right now that have learned that. They think I'm just gonna go out and have a TV show and or film my night hunts, and then it's just so much that goes into it.
They don't see all the hard work.
No, and the thing is, this is long before the days of thermal. This is like probably back in the early 2000s.
Lights weren't even mounted to the gun yet.
No. We were at that point in time. We were using an old Light Force. We had some smaller ones, and then we had a big giant one. I think it was a Light Force 240 or something like that.
Yeah.
And at the time, we were like, okay, well, let's take out this light, and we'll shine this light just like we do hunting contests, and expect to get this video with it. So I went out and bought, a reasonably expensive camera that I thought was what I could afford. It's about a $4,500, $5,000 camera at the time. Yeah. And we were calling coyotes into like 30, 40 yards with the red light. And you couldn't see. I mean, it was
Because
like,
the camera wasn't.
yeah.
wasn't
I mean, you could
sensitive
see it
enough.
with your eyeballs, but
Yeah.
if you were there, but then you go back and you watch it on TV, and it's just like, man, I don't want to show that to nobody, you know. So I told the guys I was hunting with at the time, I said the only way that we're going to get anything is we got to figure out anything that anybody would want to watch. We've got to figure out a way to get these animals to come into a white light. That's like, I know that there's got to be some kind of a way.
Why white? And so you were using colored at the time?
We were using a red light.
So why does it have to be white?
Well, for one, it's just back then, they weren't like different colored LEDs. They were actually put different colored filters, which basically when you put a filter over the top of your light, it just cut the amount of light in half. So when you get rid of that red filter, the amount of light that you're bouncing back into the lens of the camera doubles immediately.
Yeah.
Well, it also doubles on the animal that you're putting it on. So what?
And it kind of looks better too.
It looks way better. You can see what's actually happening. Well, at the time we were like, we don't know if this is going to work. So I told him, it's like, let's go run out one night and just leave the filter at home. We'll go hunt just like we always did, but with no filter on the light.
Yeah. White lights.
Handheld white light. And the guy I was with, he's like, okay, I'm going to shine. We pick up these eyes. Well, as soon as he hit this coyote with these eyes, he's coming good. He's about to run the truck over, you know. He takes his light, puts it on him, and then he lifts it up, like to put him in the halo. I was like, no, put it back down on him, see what he does. So he put it right back on him, put as much light as that light had, he put it right on the coyote. The coyote just kept on coming.
Why would he put it in halo? What is that like? Is that a technique you used to?
Back then, a lot of guys would like to halo
You
the animal.
You'd think that the halo was better.
That was
So
the
you wouldn't even use
mindset.
the whole
There's a
light.
lot of, mentally for a lot of guys when they were running lights is they would halo the animal to where they can still see eyes, and when they get ready to kill, pre-thermal,
Yeah.
they had a regular day scope. They would drop the light down on them, and that's how they would kill them. Well, he started to do that, and I said, no, put it back on him. Well, he put it right back on the coyote. Coyote runs up, like we shoot him 20 yards in the face with a shotgun.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, we can do this.
We got something here.
There's something tangible here that I can go and take and show somebody.
Yeah.
And that was kind of how the transition from red lights filming to white light, just in general, the footage quality doubled immediately.
And when was this? What year was this, you think?
That was probably 2005,
2005, okay.
somewhere in that ballpark. 2004, 2005. I bought my first camera in 2004. And then about probably a year later, we spent the whole year filming with the handheld white light. And what I kept running into is we basically would have this really, really rock solid, steady footage of coyotes and bobcats coming in. The camera would be still, but the light guy would be,
Flashing all over the place.
I mean, he's still not mounted to the gun or the camera.
yeah, he'd be sitting there. Even if he was like this, you could still see the jitters in the light. Well,
Yeah.
it made it appear like the footage wasn't steady.
Yeah.
So I'm like, man, I got to figure out a way to fix that. So enter the first camera mounted light. And it kind of led from there to several versions later.
Do you have a picture of that first camera mounted light somewhere?
I do somewhere.
We'll have to get that from you and show it.
Yeah,
It's pretty crazy.
I got it. It'd take me a while to find it, but I
Yeah.
think we're on probably like the 10th version of light rigs that we've built since then.
So that's when the evolution really kind of kicked up, is when you said, okay, I got to make camera mounted light, and then you just keep the progression. So what do you do in that progression to make the footage better and better and better with the lights?
Well, the first one that we built had one single light. And we didn't realize at the time the only reason that we built that rig
Yeah.
was to ensure that when we got good video of an animal coming in, that the most crucial part of the whole thing, the impact, gets caught. And inevitably, every time that we would shoot, the gun would go off before suppressors,
Yeah.
the light guy would,
Jumping.
and you'd miss the kill shot.
Yeah,
So
I still do that
was,
sometimes.
That was the only reason that we built that rig to begin with. But what we didn't realize is how much it would change. Like, it completely changed the look of nighttime video at the time.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing out there that had that look to it. And that's what I was after. I wanted something that when people watched it, they were like, wow, that's different, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And, but that first rig that we built, we called in animals, and I kept looking at it. I'm like, how do we make that picture better? Well, you'd see the animal and a donut of light in the center of the frame, and all around that it would be dark. It was just, because the light was just in the center of the screen.
Small, like a pinpoint light type of thing.
Yeah. And I thought, man, I wonder if I put a light to the left and to the right of the middle light, if it would just light up the terrain around it, not put any more light on the animal, but you could see all the stuff that he was coming through to get to you. So then we went from 1 light to 3 lights to 5 lights, back down to 4 lights that were brighter, then to LEDs that were about twice as bright as those, and now we're on another set of LED lights that are even brighter than those. And
So would you say that your progression with the lights kind of went along with the progression of the technology that was out there at the time?
Yes.
So you're just basically waiting, I need a better light. Once one comes out, you
Yes.
upgrade it.
And back then, we were all almost 100% hunting from a truck because there was LEDs weren't really even a thing back then. So we had a truck with the rack on the back of it, and then you got this big giant light rig, and that rig at the time was probably that big, but it had 3 car batteries underneath the platform that powered it. Now, looking back on it, we've got this little bitty light rig that's this big, powered by a little bitty race car battery, and it's twice as bright as the stuff that we had on the truck.
So I've seen your rack now. It's this giant rack on the back of your truck. What was similar to that back then?
Sorta, yeah. It was pretty similar to it. You hunted out of the main rack that we used at the time.
Was the purpose of the rack to get better video, or what was the purpose of the rack?
We always hunted out of a rack hunting contest and stuff.
Yeah.
For the most part, and we felt that the footage would be better if we could get elevated.
Yeah.
And get video of them, because a lot of times the stuff that we hunt, we'll have tall grass and stuff like that. We just see them better from up in the rack. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's another thing. It's like you're not going to get the same kind of footage that you get from the ground.
It's hard.
Yeah,
Especially this time.
You got to be real selective. For the last 3 or 4 years, we've done a lot of ground hunting, and it's opened up a whole lot more opportunity because we don't have to get the truck into places.
Yeah.
But you also have to be a whole lot more selective and pick and choose the areas that you actually set up. Because if you do get one, we've learned if you get one in close on the ground, it's a whole different deal being at high level with them than it is up in that truck. But
so the lights get better and better and better, and then at some point you kind of plateau, or do you reach somewhere where we've made it as good as it's going to get, or is it still a current?
Man, as far as the lighting is concerned, we've reached the point where it's overkill for a guy. If a guy's just wanting to run lights, it's overkill. But we've reached the point where the lights are bright enough to where by the time that they get into that 20-yard range, the amount of light that was in the camera when they were way out there is about 1/3 as much as it is. In other words, there's too much light when they get close. So we're literally having to shut the light down to the cameras, stopping it down as they get closer to not blow them out on the video. So
at this point, you don't need more light.
More light is really not the answer. The only thing that we did here 2 or 3 years ago, we upgraded to a really good 4K camera. That was a big jump in quality, but other than that, it's just taking our time with the animals and trying to get the best content of the opportunities that we do get, you know?
Yeah, so alongside the light progression, I'm sure there's a lot of other things progressing at the time. I mean, you didn't just become a storyteller overnight, right? So you kind of honed that craft while you're learning your lights, or video editing. Where did you learn all that stuff?
The editing side of it just kind of came along with the territory. What happened? We basically got hooked up with some guys that started a predator show back in 2010, I believe. A guy named Gary Robertson. They've got a show called Carnivore, and they wanted some guys to do all their nighttime stuff. Well, we did that for about 4 seasons. We basically would shoot video. We would then send the video to the producer. He would put it together and do his own take on it. Well, nothing against the feel of the show that they had. We just wanted something kind of that had more of our own identity.
Yeah.
And from there, I kind of started messing around editing and just kind of learning as I went. And finally, we got the point where it was time to go off and do our own thing, to where if it's either going to sink or fail, but one way or the other. If it does well, it's our fault. If it does bad and doesn't do anything, it's still our fault. It's nobody else's.
So from a standpoint of making your own identity, did you have any sources of inspiration or people that you really? I mean, Burnham Brothers, I guess, would be one.
Not really.
Not really. I mean, like from the very beginning, like obviously your dad. I know your dad was a big influence on you, but it's from the night hunting standpoint. Are there any people out there that are doing the same thing that you think, oh, they're doing this better than me, and I can take a point from
There really weren't a whole lot of guys. There was only a handful of groups out there that were actually filming predators at night. And again, this is all way before thermal. So it's like nowadays it's so easy to go out and hit the record button on a thermal scope and you get video to some degree. Back then,
weren't a lot of people doing it.
it's a process. And guys would look at it and say, well, I can go do that. Give me that light rig, I'll go do that.
Yeah.
There's a whole
Way
lot
more
more to it than that.
Yeah, there's way more to it.
You know, and then on top of that, to further complicate it, for you to be able to go and get the footage, you try your best to get the best stuff possible, and then being able to set back and say, okay, where's the story at in all this?
Yeah.
The kills are only, to me, that's, as far as the show itself, they kind of take a back seat to the story for each one. And that's the one thing that I wanted to be able to incorporate into the show, was make it not just a bang flop, another coyote coming over another hill. I wanted each show to have some guts to it, a backbone to it that was more than that. And that's the hard part about the whole thing, is finding the story, finding the footage that supports it, and building the show around that. And that's what I wanted, and that was kind of my objective with the show from day one, was finding that.
So from day one, did you think you wanted to, you wanted to have a show, or did you want to just do YouTube videos, or did you just want to, or YouTube didn't exist?
After we did the stuff with carnivore for that time frame, I was like, I feel confident with the guys that are on the team that we could go out, get our own footage, and be able to tell our own story ourselves.
Yeah.
And there's a point where it was just like, you got to just, cut ties and just take that leap. And that's what we did. And it's just, kind of led to where it's at today,
So this is, so that basically is all the way up to what I'll call that the dark ages. When you still have to use a light.
Yeah.
Right?
You're still using the lights.
Yeah. Well, but at some point,
At
you
some point.
came out of the dark ages.
Yes.
Into the
thermal scene.
into the thermal age.
Yeah. We did.
How did that change what you're doing?
Well, let me stop and back up just a
Okay.
second. I wanted to tell you, this is one of the things I wanted to talk about. On that same note, we did a show this year. We called it "This Little Light of Mine," and the gist of the show was a lot of guys these days that thermal's gotten to the point where it's gotten affordable enough. The average guy that just wants to get into night hunting, what do? They go out there and they buy them, a reasonably decent thermal. They go out there and they start killing with it, which is great.
Yeah.
Love it. But the part that they miss by not getting that same background, like back when we started, if you didn't have a light or didn't use a light, you weren't night hunting. You had to learn how to use a light if you were going to go out and be successful calling and killing coyotes.
It was a skill set.
It's something. It's exactly right. It's what you had. It was the prerequisite to getting from point A to B.
Yeah.
Being successful, you had to learn lights and how they work. Well, these days there's a lot of guys that they'll watch the show and they'll be like, a coyote can come to a light like that. They literally don't know. They have no clue that lights are even something that,
Especially a white light. That's
Right.
still the argument to this day, is the white light.
Yeah.
Right.
I learned, I had to experience that to understand it.
I see a lot of people say, well, coyotes just don't come to my call in my area. They're not as dumb as your coyotes. They won't come to a white light. What do you think?
Do you really want to get
Yeah. Yeah. I want to open that can of worms.
What I
Just,
think there's numbers of animals in every area across the country that are good candidates for lights. I also think there's also a percentage of those those coyotes in those areas that aren't good candidates for lights. And why that is, it could be a number of things. I personally think it's probably whatever those coyotes have experienced. They may have been called at and hit with the light, shot at. Somebody driving around with a spotlight hits them and shoots at them, or they smell them or something like that. But I think in any state that you go to, if you hunt long enough, you're eventually going to run into those animals that haven't seen it. Those are the ones that we can call up with the brightest light known to man and kill them at 10 yards.
Well, that's easy for you to say. You never hunted in Pennsylvania.
Exactly. Well, somebody...
Or have you?
We actually have hunted in Pennsylvania. Now that you mention it. Yeah, we heard that for several years that you can't go to Pennsylvania. I actually had a guy tell me one time that if you go east of the Mississippi, then they won't put up with a white light.
They get the memo when they go up to the Mississippi. Oh, okay, no lights here.
Yeah, as soon as they cross the Mississippi River and they go over that bridge, they become
How
only
do the
red
coyotes
light.
get across the Mississippi River in the first place?
I don't know.
Are they stowaways?
But that goes to show you the mindset that a lot of guys, I think 99% of it's mental.
Yeah.
Because so long that red light deal was preached that you got to have a red light, you got to have a red light. And then you got these goofballs from Texas calling these animals into ridiculously close ranges with
white light.
with a giant white light, not just a little bit of light. I mean, there's more light on them than there is during the daytime.
You know, there probably are some coyotes out there that just won't. I mean, we know there are that just won't come to a white light, and it's easy to get discouraged when you go out and you call and you call and you call and you call and nothing happens. But you know, it's like we're not saying the guys in those states are wrong. It's just that don't get discouraged and keep calling because eventually
You're going to come
you'll
across that
find
one.
one.
Yeah.
Eventually,
Yeah.
you will. Just don't let a streak of 5 or 10 nights out with bad luck make you think that it's just impossible.
For sure. And
It's
these
impossible,
days, with the cost of thermal being what it is, the solution sometimes is just go straight thermal.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing that says that you have to have a light to be able to go out and do this. Obviously, these days, it's more affordable for guys to be able to run thermal.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the reason I told you about, the pre-thermal days and guys not having, these days, nobody's forced to go through that learning curve of lights.
Did you use lights?
No.
No?
My first experience with lights was with Chris, and that was in the rack. And I was like, this is stupid. I was the biggest hater of lights. I'm just going to, you know that. I was always bashing it.
No, I get it. I can totally get it.
Chris always told me, man, you're hunting with a thermal, you need to put a light on your gun. Remember?
Yeah.
He was telling us you need to put some type, we had surefires, and he was like, run that light on your gun. And I was like, I'm not running it. And finally, I get up in the rack with Chris. Chris is running lights. He's calling, and this coyote comes. It was 30-mile-an-hour winds that night. It was stupid. I was like, we're not calling in dogs. Dog comes flying in. I kill it. And it was like 40 yards from the truck. And I'm like, how did that happen? And you was like, camouflage.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
it took me forever to figure it out.
So people think that I don't want to turn a light on because it's going to scare the coyotes
Yep.
off, right?
It's the reverse of that.
Why are they wrong? Why is it the reverse of that?
It's the reverse of that. When put it this way, the first thing you got to start out with is, am I dealing with coyotes that are going to put up with it? That's the first question.
Mm-hmm.
If you are, then the one thing that light will give you, that thermal will never be able to give you is, let me put it this way, the one thing that thermal can't do is take their sight away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that thermal, unless they come out with something different in the future, thermal is never going to be able to blind a coyote like a regular old light can.
So that's what it is, blinding them.
That's the key. I mean, if they can't see you, that's the reason that we can get them to the close ranges and stuff that we get them to, is because they can't see anything.
It's an experience like no other.
So when guys are like, how are you getting them so close? It's like, my coyotes aren't that dumb. They won't come that close. Really, it's you're blinding them.
Exactly what it is. The amount of control that you have, especially on those nights when you got any kind of moonlight, with the coyote once he's committed and coming to a light, compared to just standing out there in the open with thermal, is like 100-fold.
So you say put up with it. How do you know if they're going to put up with it?
You'll know
Immediately, or
you're going to know. Most of the times when we're in an area and we're calling, we're scanning. Usually Ronnie or somebody's, he's the light guy. He'll scan with the headlamp, pretty dim. It's not really bright. It's just bright enough to pick up eyes for the size of field that we're in.
Yeah.
So when we show up, we call. He shines 360, never turns the light off. And when he picks up a set of eyes, he keeps the light on him the whole time. Well, usually if it's a coyote that's been educated to it or has seen it before, you see a set of, the light guy will see a set of eyes for a split second and then nothing. because
It'll just flash.
Yeah, it's just a flash. A coyote sees it, boom, he's gone. Those are usually the ones that something's happened to those coyotes in their lifetime where they know when they see that light, it's danger.
So if you see a flash and nothing else after that, turn the light off, go straight thermal with that coyote.
Probably so at that stage. But the thermal now these days, back 20 years ago, we would see that and then we would never see anything again. We'd be like, okay, where'd it go?
Yeah.
These days we're like we can physically watch that with the
With
thermal and know exactly what's happening with those coyotes. So we've learned a whole lot more just being able to have the thermal just to see what's actually happening. Back then we would just be like, well, that one's seen it.
Yeah. It's over.
So being a light guy, if you already have your process, why change? Why go with thermal? Like what made you want to even consider it? Because you're already getting this awesome footage. You already have a good method.
To me, it was like the thermal. What thermal did is it didn't substitute what we already do with the lights. It complemented it. In other words, not only did it give us something else to add to the footage that we were already getting, it gave us a whole different look to cut back and forth from.
Yeah.
So we'd have the white lights, we'd get the video with that, and then we'd have the thermal that kind of combine with that with the same animals. So
I remember those days. It was quite the debate going on, about thermal versus lights, and
right.
I think there's probably an old episode about that.
Oh yeah, I remember
Just run thermal.
Yeah.
I remember the first time you ever went with us. I thought, if we could ever get this guy in the truck and just let him see kind of what we do, it would kind of open your eyes to. Tell me about that. I mean, what?
So I didn't. I mean, I used spotlights growing up to kill pigs and stuff, but we didn't really do the whole predator calling with lights as much as we did pigs. We did a little bit, but mostly pigs. So when I got into night hunting, it was right out of the gate. It was thermal. Well, and thermal and digital, but I didn't see any reason for a light. I was the guy that was saying, just turn it off. What are you doing? You're giving away our position here, man.
You're an idiot.
Yeah.
You're scaring him.
Coyote's coming, you turn the light on, he runs away. I'm going, why did you do that? Stop. But a few years later, I understand you have to sacrifice a few coyotes. You showed me you have to sacrifice a few coyotes if you want to get that footage. It's not 100% kill rate. It's like some nights it's a high kill rate. Some nights it's
horrible.
It's a 10% or a 0% kill rate, and you just have to keep going. I think that's probably one of the characteristics about you that's helped you have so much success in filming is you're pretty stubborn.
Yeah.
Like
really, really stubborn.
At some point, I'm like, let's go, man. They're just not coming. No, let's keep trying. Let's keep trying.
Relentless.
Like we've called this spot 10 times, and we never see anything, and then that's the time, boom.
One shows up.
Right in the truck.
One thing I think that we've learned over time is that usually there's not a whole lot of in between with coyotes. Yeah. Cats are different, but coyotes in our area, they're either coming full speed, but trying to run you over, or they're tuck and tail running the other way.
Yeah.
They let you know really quick if they're the right ones, what we consider to be the right coyote. And the way we look at it is if we have to burn through 3 or 4 of the bad ones to eventually get that one to come up and smile.
It's worth it.
It's worth it for the video.
So what's your favorite thermal of all time?
Favorite thermal?
Favorite thermal device. And it could be like, it was this and it went to this and went to this. Like, what do you prefer?
Weapon sight?
Both. Say weapon sights, yeah.
I need to hide this one.
Pull it. Yeah. We need to talk about that in a second. Because
yeah. This is the original OG micro.
Yeah.
Had some battle scars. Anthony keeps trying to steal it from me.
Here, let me see it. Wait, hold it up in front of Anthony's face.
We're going to get it back. We're going to get it
over
back.
my dead body.
That is like serial number 1 or 2. Like that was one of the very, very first RE25s here.
The buttons are rubbed off.
Yeah.
The paint's
and they're
rubbed
backwards.
off. Yeah, the buttons are backwards. So this was one that I brought to you early on, like probably 2021, 22 maybe.
Yeah.
Or early on in this device's history, and said, hey, I think we got something. Let me know what you think.
And I just somehow forgot to give it back to you.
It's never been mounted on a helmet either, or a weapon. It's always been used as a handheld spotter.
Yeah, it's been dropped out of the truck. If anybody wants to know how durable iRay products are, you can look at this thing, and it still works. I think I've dropped it out of the truck like 4 or 5 times onto like concrete.
It's the most abused unit I've seen.
Yeah, but it still runs.
So as a handheld spotter, that has been. I know you were in the patrol for a while, though. You like that patrol and you like the reap.
Yeah, I like the patrol. The thing that I hated about the patrol was the CR123s.
Yeah.
And the reap. The reap, I got so sick. I bet I spent $3,000 on CR123s.
Wow.
I got to the point where I was like, this is stupid.
Yeah.
And then this thing came out, and I'm like, this is the best thing ever. Because it's so small, I can stick it in my pocket, walking around on stuff. But
We need to get you a new battery, by the way.
So weapon sights.
weapon
At one
sights?
point it's probably reap, and then what?
What's that?
At one point it's probably the reap, and then what?
Man, to be honest with you, the one that's been on my gun for the last 3 or 4 months, if I can talk, I don't know if I can talk about it.
1024, the 1024.
That 1024, that scope, I think, is going to be probably the biggest game changer in this industry. That this industry has even more so than the 1280.
Yeah.
It'll be the biggest leap in thermal in probably the last 5 or 6 years.
Why more so than the 1280?
Price.
Yeah.
Price, and it's a 3X.
Yeah, that base magnification.
Yeah, right. I mean, like right now, it's priced at a range where guys are going out and spending $1,000, $2,000 more on what they consider to be the best 640. Why would you buy that when you've got one that's a 1024 with a 3X base mag that looks that good?
Yeah,
it's a killing machine.
It's a killing machine. Is the sight picture is a circle. I mean, it looks like when you look through a normal day optic. You know, you've got your peripheral vision, and then right to the scope you see magnified.
Yeah.
Sight picture. It's very similar to using a day scope. It's the most similar experience so far, I think. Using a day scope.
One thing I think sometimes guys don't think about too. Yeah, it's a 1024, but the detail it resolves over the 1280 is actually higher because that magnification. You're getting more detail.
Well, actually, it's not, but
well, if you think about it though, if you took the 1280 and you magnified it up to get to
1024
to the 1024,
it'd be slightly better because it's got a 75 millimeter lens.
I don't know.
That
Doesn't look that
1024 is sick.
The 1024, I feel
It's
like when
sick.
I'm looking at a coyote at 50 yards, I can see more detail with that scope than I can the 1280.
The base mag. If you're a varmint hunter, I'm telling you guys right now, the 1024 is where it's at. With the eyepiece, you can read the reticle really good, and a 3x base magnification. It is huge. Go up to 4x, you're still in 640. It's wicked.
I just feel like you're that the fact that it's got the magnification is it's in the sweet spot for a coyote hunter. A guy that wants to run it on a bolt gun, that's legit.
Match made in heaven.
Yeah.
So, all right, some of the craziest things that you've done, or that I've seen you do. There was one video a couple years ago where the suppressor's head was basically on the pig's, or the suppressor was basically on top of the pig's head.
Oh, that was fun.
How did that work? How did you do that?
Man, we kind of made it up to be more hard than it actually was, but it was pretty tricky. It took from the time that I kind of took off to go towards the pig to the time I actually shot the pig was maybe 45 minutes, and I moved like maybe 40 yards.
So
In
a yard
45
a
minutes.
minute.
Yeah.
So super slow.
What it was, this landowner was feeding his cows corn. Well, these pigs would come up and eat corn out of the cow crap. And when they would get in there would be cows in there. There would be pigs, groups of pigs. They'd go over here and they'd eat cow shit, and then they'd go over here and they'd eat cow. And like the whole time, I'm like, okay, I need to figure out.
They eat the corn out of the.
Yes, they eat the corn out of the
patties.
crap.
Yeah.
And it's pretty disgusting, but that's what they
Pretty
did.
gross. Yeah.
But I was trying to make sure that I stayed upwind of all these little groups of pigs running all over this field. So I picked the furthest south group of pigs that I could go to. And there was one or two really big ones in there. And right when I got close, they just wandered off to another group. But there were still 2 or 3 of them left. And I just creeped along like a statue. I just moving my feet just a tiny bit at a time, and just finally got close enough to where the only reason why I didn't like actually touch the pig with the suppressor was because I was worried. I couldn't see him enough with my eyes.
So you weren't using night vision, you were just using your naked eye?
Yeah. Yeah, I could see him with my naked eye, but I was like, okay, I'm close enough to where I might be able to hit him right on the top of the head, but I kind of kept looking through the thermal because I had the gun down like this, because I knew I was wanting to kind of reach over there and touch him in the top of the head, but I think
Such a crazy
I might have
clip.
got like that far from it.
That was such a crazy
What's
clip.
that
fun.
video called? What's that one?
Pork creeping.
Pork creeping?
Pork creeping.
Pork creeping.
Yeah.
Trademark 2024.
It's
Pork
exactly.
creeper.
Chris is all about pushing the envelope. If you hunt with Chris, he's gonna make you do some crazy.
No.
And there was 2 coyotes in the field one night. Chris is filming, and I'm in front of him, and I'm like 30 yards from 2 coyotes laying down in the field. And Chris, I turn around, and I look at Chris, and Chris is like, closer. And I'm like, closer. Like, getting up a little bit closer, 20 yards. Finally, the coyotes pop up. I killed both of them, but I was like, what the hell were you thinking, man? I'm just wanting to kill you. He's like, closer.
Go big or go home.
Yeah, go big or go home. It's always
fun.
pushing the envelope, man. Always.
Where was that
It's
at? I
awesome,
can't
though.
remember.
That was where the damn concrete plant went in.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what happened to that place.
Man, that place got ruined.
Yeah, it did.
We used
What
to kill a
about-
lot of animals over there.
How did you meet Anthony? You met him
I met him through you.
me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the first time I met him was like the first year that we were hunting together.
Yeah. And then
Thank you.
how did we meet?
We met actually at SHOT Show.
Oh, that's right.
I was actually,
cruising around.
it was
At SHOT
before,
Show?
yeah, this was before the show
through
had started.
James Skull.
Through James. Yeah, James. I was talking to James, and we were looking for sponsors for the show. And long story short, he was like, man, you need to go talk to Tyler. I'm like, Tyler who? He's like, he's a guy's been working with us on this thermal stuff. I was thinking, thermal? Wonder how that would go. So I looked for you, and then I met you. And long story short, I didn't realize it, but you lived basically right in my backyard.
Yeah.
And then one thing led to another, and that's kind of all led from there.
Chris was like, a sponsorship is really steep. It's like $500, and I was like,
I don't know about this.
oh, about this one. I stewed on it for like 2 weeks.
You made me work for it.
I remember one time. I remember he called me. He was like, well, "You're never gonna know unless you try it." Okay, so and I was like, "Okay, fine, I'll try."
That was hard-headed Tyler back in the day, boy.
man.
I will say this: the thermal has been a godsend, and I really appreciate the friendship, because to me that's what the night hunting aspect of it.
Yeah.
The best part is the fact that you guys come from a totally different breed of night hunting than I've come from.
Yeah.
But it's like we have this same, like y'all said on the first podcast, we're all related. That's the one thing that connects everybody is we all love it.
And curiosity, like I felt, it seems like a lot of people are just kind of set, or a lot of night hunters are kind of set in their way. This is the way to do it. This is the way I've done it. This way I've seen people do it. That's it. But I'm curious. I want to know, is there a better way? And I feel like you have that same curiosity. What could we do
for sure.
differently? How could we do something differently? When it comes to your videos, you're always trying to find another way to make them better. Like, for example, one of the things is slider shots, or like astrophotography, right?
Oh, beautiful.
Like, how did you get into that? I mean, you look
Beautiful.
at that stuff and it's like, it's top notch. I mean, you should
appreciate
sell that stuff to somebody for stock footage. I
Yeah.
mean, that stuff is crazy.
And he's doing it for fun.
Yeah.
And then I see you get out there and do it, and it's like, okay, I got to set this laser up and point it at this nebula and do this and put a track here and set the camera, and then you come back like, oh, didn't record tonight. And you just spent 6 hours on something. You got nothing out of it. So it's like, back at it again. It's like, how did you get this drive to want to make things so incredibly difficult on yourself, but also produce a product that's really, really fun to watch?
I don't know. The best thing I can kind of relate it to is somebody that's trying to create like art, or like if you do something, you go make something, and you can sit back after you're finished and say, "Wow, that's what I wanted. I did that." And for me, the show, in a way, I want it to come across in a way to where it portrays not only how much fun the sport is, but also it's at a quality level to where people naturally just want to watch it.
Yeah.
And the time-lapse stuff was just, at the time, was just a really good complement to the show. And I took off into the Astro stuff back in, I want to say it was 2011. didn't know anything about anything with cameras or settings and all that, and just watched a lot of videos and finally ended up figuring out enough to make some pretty cool time lapse.
Beautiful. It's beautiful work.
I saw some that you did down in, where was it? Big Bend
Big
or
Bend.
somewhere on the border.
Yeah, that's a cool place. It's dark down there.
Dark. I bet you.
Mexican cowboys.
Yeah. Are you ever like worried you run into on the border? You run into somebody?
I did last year. I went down there this last summer. It's so dark down there. You can sit on the tailgate and you can't see your feet. That's how dark
insane.
it's dark.
Yeah.
The stars are so bright because of that like when you're like walking around, once your eyes adjust to it, it's like almost like moonlight.
So you ran into somebody like a person coming across the border, or a person?
Well, do you really want to know the true story? You want
Yeah.
me to give you the true story?
Tell the whole story. Let's hear it.
If you want to know probably one of the craziest things that I've ever had happen to me while I was out filming,
Okay.
this is probably one of them. I go down in this canyon. In Big Bend, they've got this canyon called the Santa Elena Canyon. If you had never been there, it's probably one of the most incredible sights that you can look at with your eyes. Well, that canyon flooded out, and I couldn't get access to the mouth of the canyon where I wanted to shoot a bunch of time lapse. So I got on the map and I found another canyon that was all the way off the grid on the other side of Big Bend.
Yeah.
And when I say off the grid, I'm talking like 30 miles from anyone or anything.
You do this by yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, I had my pistol with me at the time, and I thought, man, I better, people start, coming across the border or something like that. So I'm thinking, okay, I get down in there about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 6 o'clock, just wanting to get down there and scout and figure out where I wanted to set up. Well, once I got down in there, nobody was there. And when you see the mouth of this canyon, it was like it had a bank where I can walk almost into the river to where, it funneled down into just canyon bluff walls.
Okay.
Okay?
Kind of like pictures you see like for like Grand Canyon, just
Yeah, it's straight
walls.
up. But before you get into there, it kind of just necks down, and there's a bank right there where I could set up my cameras. Well, I thought, well, this is, secluded enough. There's nobody around. I'm thinking, okay, I'm all by myself.
Okay.
Well, I get set up. It's almost dark. It's just bright enough to where I can, I can see 40 or 50 yards, maybe. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, man, I got to go to the bathroom. Really bad.
You got a jet pain.
Yeah. And it wasn't a good kind.
Uh-oh.
So I thought, okay, I got to go figure this out. So I got to run over here. I looked down the creek bank, and there was a floating log log that had floated up on the river bank that was just kind of laying down there.
A toilet.
Yeah, perfectly good toilet. So I walk over there, and it's still, light enough to where I'm not running my cameras or anything yet. Not a soul within 100 miles of me. That's what I'm thinking in my
Yeah.
head. My camera and all my stuff with the pistol and everything in it was between me and where it goes down into those canyon walls.
Okay.
So I walk over here and start doing my business, minding my own business, just looking up at the stars, enjoying life, and quiet, nobody around. All of a sudden, I hear this talking. I'm like, did I just hear that? And then I look around and I'm thinking, I had this micro in my pocket.
Uh-huh.
So I'm like, trying to get this thing fired up.
Had you wiped yet, or
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
No. This was just getting started.
I was wondering how much fecal matter's on this thing right here. Sorry.
So, you really want the micro?
No, hell no. I don't even want to look at it anymore.
Are you sure?
No.
So anyways, you're
Disgusting.
So
yeah.
I'm at first base with this
Okay.
deal here, and all of a sudden I hear this talking. I'm like, okay, did I really hear that?
Yeah.
It was just faint, real off in the distance. So I finally got the micro fired up, and again, like I said, it's almost dark. And I looked around, didn't see nothing. Well, about 15, 20 seconds later, I hear it again. I'm like, okay, I know I heard talking.
Yeah.
But where the hell is it at? I'm like, I can't figure out where it's coming from. Well, I finally was like, okay, I got to get this shit over with. And I got to get back to that bag that's got my pistol in it.
Yeah.
And
You brought toilet paper with you?
huh?
You brought toilet paper?
I can't even remember. I don't even remember. I might have had toilet paper. Actually, I used my shirt. I think I ripped off a piece
You
of my
did.
shirt. Yes.
You did.
I took a picture of it. I ripped a piece of my shirt
So
off.
now you're wearing a belly shirt.
I've got a belly shirt. That's what it was. I remember that specifically.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm pulling up, getting all my stuff together, and I'm walking over to the bag. Well, about this time, I hear this horse walking through water coming out of the canyon walls.
So it's like shallow water.
Yeah, it was shallow enough where they could walk, and it was, up to almost a horse's belly.
Yeah.
Well, it was two dudes on a horse, and they were coming out of here, and I'm thinking, okay, this is going to get
Western.
pretty Western real
Yeah.
quick, Well, I looked with my thermal, and I'm like, okay, it looks like an older guy and a kid. So I'm thinking maybe it's just somebody that's probably the fastest way to get from one pasture to another, because there was cows down in there where I was at.
Yeah.
But I didn't think that anybody would be going through there
Yeah.
to get from point A to B. They just come wandering up out of there out of nowhere, and I'm just like, crap. Because I didn't want to be around nobody at the time. Well, finally, when they rounded the corner, I was like, hola. I was like making my presence known, because I didn't want them to freak out and be like,
Yeah.
in the middle of nowhere. They probably haven't seen some guy down in there with all this equipment.
In a belly shirt.
In a belly
In
shirt.
a belly shirt.
Yeah. Yeah, so finally they roll up beside me, and I could tell it's a farmer and his son. They had gone to check their cows, and they were coming home that afternoon. But you talk about make the hair stand up on the back of your
Oh,
neck.
I bet.
It's one thing when you're, in the country or something like that where we hunt and you run into somebody or you hear somebody, but when you're there, that's like
it's you. There's
Yeah.
nobody coming.
Yeah, that's pretty
There's
freaky.
nobody that
you
can
are
help
on
you.
your own,
Yeah.
son.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So, but I guarantee you, I've often wondered what kind of story he told his family.
Yeah, I wanna
when
find
he
that
walked
guy.
around
If
the
you're
corner and
listening-
saw this big fat white guy in a belly shirt.
If you're listening and you ever saw a guy in a Rover belly shirt,
Right. Yeah, and I had
Big
my
Ben.
pistol kind of behind my back like
Yeah.
this where they couldn't see it.
Yeah.
I was ready. So I
That's
didn't
wild.
know. I didn't know what was about to happen.
did you get some good footage out of that night?
I
hopefully?
did.
Okay.
I did.
hey, so that's just a small price to pay, right?
Yeah, it turned out pretty
For,
good. But that's probably the last time that I'll venture off down in there. It was
Yeah.
just, I got to thinking after that happened, I'm thinking, man, yeah, I got a
Pretty damn
pistol,
dangerous.
but I mean, 3 or 4 dudes come walking through there middle of the night.
Yeah.
Thinking, okay, where am I going to go? You either fight or you just hide.
All right, we gotta talk about this little argument here,
All right.
and we're gonna do it. So, me, Chris, and Tyler was trying to do some episodes. This was what, 3 years ago? 2.5, 3 years ago?
Yeah, something like that.
We're out there hunting those cornfields, and it was old Gary places right there behind Gary's house, not too far from Gary's. And we got in this little argument about how we're going to our pursuit angles on pigs. Chris and Tyler thought when the pigs come out of a tree line, so we'll just say, a square, they're coming out of the west side of the pasture, that we need to go in between their route. So if they're coming out of the west side of the pasture tree line, that we need to be in between that. And I was arguing
on the west tree line.
And I was arguing that we need to be on the east side of them, shooting at them, running back to where they came from.
Which direction was the wind blowing?
No,
Well,
what,
that
what
does
he's
play a
arguing,
big-
what he's arguing is he would rather the whole topic is would you rather shoot at a pig coming to you or going away from
Going
you?
away from
So they'll say the wind's blowing out of the north.
Take the
to
wind out of the
south.
equation.
Yeah,
say-
we'll
say-
take wind out of the
we'll just
equation,
say
south or north.
south. So it doesn't matter. You can go left or you can go east or west.
You can go east or
So the
west.
question is, do you want to get between where they came from, or do you want to just shoot at them to go back where they came to?
Go back where they came from. And I'd rather shoot at them going back where they came from. Every time we got in position in between, 'cause y'all tried making me look stupid in that video.
So you want to shoot at pigs going farther away from you? You want them to be farther
I'm
from you
sticking
when
to
you
my
shoot?
guns, and I'd rather shoot at them going back where they came from, because every time we get in between them, guess what they do? They run away from us.
Well,
They
then now you're
never
shooting at
come
them
at
running
us.
away either way. So you win either way. Now, I mean, at least you have a chance that they're going to get closer to you if you. Chris, back me up here.
Just a stupid argument.
I'm going to ask you again, would you like a shovel?
No. I'd rather shoot at them running back where they came from. So if they're running away, yeah, I'm going to shoot at them running away. But trying to get in between, we've done this so many times. We've blown the hunt trying to get in between them. We've shot at them in between their exit route, and they ran away. They run away.
I think we need more data points on this one. We need to.
Yeah, there's a lot of
We don't
variables.
see those
There's a
pigs
lot of
anymore.
variables to go into this argument, but I'm going to stick with I would rather have them coming closer than further.
But they never come at us. You start shooting, they run away. So they're going to run. They're going to run further east.
You could call them. What about that? We didn't talk about calling pigs.
Oh man, we need to talk about that because we some hunts up.
Trying to call.
It worked, but the shooters.
It's about 10%.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
We actually did a show about 3 or 4 years ago about calling them. And what we learned from that show was that calling is no perfect science. If you want to call pigs, it's just because you want to call pigs. It's not because you want to kill pigs.
Or you don't want to traipse across 1,000 yards of muddy
Fields. Oh man, that was
fields.
bad.
Yeah.
But we'd run off half the groups we called at. But once it worked and came to you, it's just a totally different experience.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's you see pigs and you can go out there and kill them 9 times out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
But if you treat them like a cow and you call them, you're going to maybe kill them 2 times out of 10.
Right.
But it was like, why did they run? They ran so many times from the call.
So Chris has a theory that they run back to the hole where they came from. Like, it's a lot easier to get them to run back to where they came from than it is to just run straight across a field at you.
No, not as much that. I think what you may be thinking is a lot of times when guys are calling pigs, you'll think they're going away from you. But what it is, in my opinion, based on watching the video that we've got of them, they're trying to hone in on where the sound's at. They're not like a coyote. Like you can squeak one time from 500 yards away and not make another sound, and a coyote will land within 50 feet of that
They're
sound.
pinpointed.
So they're like running in a circle or like moving around trying to figure out, hey, where's this sound coming from?
Yeah, me and Gary called one up one night in the donkey pasture. This pig was kind of circling around, and he was kept circling around. And Gary's like, "Let me shoot him." It's like, no, he's coming. He just can't find the sound. He'd stop, he'd listen, and then he'd correct a little bit. Then he'd stop and listen, and he'd correct a little bit. And he did that like 5 or 6 times, and we ended up killing him at like 20 yards.
Wow.
Yeah.
But he acted like he was going downwind. But I don't think they're that smart when they're coming to a call. I
You don't think pigs are that smart?
They're smart.
Maybe not.
Just not smart with the calls.
Yeah, I think they're that smart, but I don't think they don't think like a coyote.
They're not trying to
They're
kill
not.
it.
They're not
just-
thinking, okay, I need to go check for wind to see if that's a guy trying to call me. I just think they can't pinpoint where the sound's coming from near as good as a coyote. So if you see one,
I agree.
if you see one that triggers when they hear the sound, as long as they're not running the other way, but they're
coming.
kind of semi coming to you, just be patient because that pig's probably going to come right to you eventually.
We've had that happen. Remember that big solo boar? It was like 350 yards away.
Yeah, we called him across the road to get to us.
Yeah.
We called him into a pasture we could hunt from a one that we
Yep,
don't have
yep,
permission.
exactly. That was
So-
crazy.
That was a big pig.
That was a big pig.
Here's another question. How many nights a week do you think you hunt, like on average? That's part 1 of the question.
During hunting season, I want to say hunting season from like September to probably March, probably 3 or 4.
3 or 4 nights a week.
On average. Yeah, maybe more on some nights, some weeks.
The next question most people are going to ask is, how does your wife let you do that? How do you get away with it?
I got a really good one.
Get a really good one, just like all of us, right? That's everyone's answer.
Yeah.
How do y'all get away with it?
Got
You
a
know, I
good one.
think that
She's really cool.
yeah, she has things that she enjoys that she likes to go and do, and I don't give her crap about that. And she knows that this is my life, this is who I am, and she doesn't try to change that. And that's a good recipe.
Yeah.
She knows during the wintertime, she usually actually gets on the same sleep schedule as I do during hunting season. So we'll be going to bed at like 2 or 3 in the morning. After we, come in, we'll sit down, watch some Netflix or whatever, and then wake up at the same time, go to bed at the same time. So it's not like
Why not?
Yeah,
Yeah.
why not? So
What fishing schedule does she get up with you at 4 in the morning?
she does not do that.
That's this time of the year.
Yeah, but
Chris is in fishing mode.
Yeah.
I don't have anywhere to be. If you guys got stuff you want to talk about, that's up to y'all.
we didn't even talk about the rack this time, and kind of run along. So you're gonna have to come back and explain the rack. We'll go through the whole deal front end.
Yeah, I appreciate y'all having me.
That rack is pretty sick. That could be a whole nother episode, is the racks.
Yeah.
Because I love it.
Yeah, we got some other topics we could talk about too. But thanks for coming down.
Yeah,
it's been a lot of fun. And
yeah, y'all are always welcome. Y'all know that.
Absolutely.
Hopefully by now y'all know y'all are always welcome. Just a phone call away.
see you
We'll
tomorrow.
probably see you next week.
What are you doing about 6:30?
Yeah, we'll see you tomorrow.
He's got a baby coming anytime soon,
Yeah,
so it's going to be a while. Yeah, today.
Sounds like a personal problem.
Not a problem. All right, over and out. I'm good.
All right.